All right, welcome everybody, Unchained Disciples. My name is Michael Leedon. We're in our series, Seeking Wholeness. Today we're going to be looking at the review of our lessons on people-pleasing and boundaries. People-pleasing and boundaries. So a quick question for you guys. Was Paul a people-pleaser? Was Paul a people-pleaser?
No, because he was running around killing people.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, that wasn't, I guess that's not too pleasant. That's not too pleasant. All right, yeah, so I'll start off by reading Galatians chapter 1, verse 10. Galatians chapter 1, verse 10. It says, "For am I now seeking the favor of people or God? Or am I striving to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a bondservant of Christ." So Paul says if he was trying to please people, then he wouldn't be a bondservant of Christ. So basically, if he was trying to please people, it would interfere with his serving Christ. That's an interesting concept. If he's trying to please people, that will interfere with his serving Christ. So today we're going to be talking about people pleasing. We're going to be talking about boundaries. So what is people pleasing? Definition here of people pleasing says that a people pleaser personality means a person feels a strong urge to please others, even at their own expense. They may feel that their wants and needs do not matter or alter their personality around others. This is different from traits such as kindness, generosity, and altruism. While people can make a balanced and intentional choice to do favors for others, an individual with people-pleasing tendencies will find it hard to say no. They may agree to do things that they do not want to or are not able to do. They may cover up how they really feel. So people-pleasing, it's when you're doing things for other people, but you don't actually want to do them. But you're doing it, the motivation is to look good. So it's different than doing something out of kindness, out of generosity. I mean, obviously, it's not saying that people who people please don't also do things out of kindness and generosity. But at times, there are other motivations, including how they want to be perceived by other people. And so I'm coming up from a people pleaser background and trying to overcome that as well. And so we have people pleasers, then we have the opposite. We have the opposite people that are maybe more selfish, or they're not concerned with how anybody else feels, and they're self-centered, they're entitled, and they never want to help anybody. And so we're not saying, that is the goal, that's where the goal to get to, but we're just kind of looking at people pleasers. We looked at anger, emotional triggers in previous lessons, and so people pleasers don't generally have necessarily emotional trigger issues, anger issues, so today we'll be looking at issues that people pleasers do have. So some questions that people may ask sometimes include, one, can I be a loving person and still set limits? Can I be a loving person and still set limits? The second question people may ask is, what are legitimate boundaries? What are some legitimate boundaries I should set? The third question is, what if someone is upset or hurt by my boundaries? Fourth is, how do I answer someone who wants my time, love, energy, or money? The fifth is, why do I feel guilty or afraid when I consider setting boundaries? The sixth is, did Jesus set boundaries? And then finally, aren't boundaries selfish? So those are some of the questions, some of the things we're going to look at. Any thoughts or comments on those questions so far?
I can relate to those. I used to remember the first time when we went through this, I found myself asking a lot of those questions prior to that. It's like, oh wait, I'm a Christian, I'm not supposed to set boundaries. That's how I thought before. Don't set boundaries. I mean, obviously, you set some boundaries, but to not do things that not sinning wise boundaries, but as other just okay. You got the idea, House.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I was the same way. You know, I thought, oh, being a good Christian means you do whatever the other person wants you to do. You know, whatever anybody wants you to do, you do it. That's what That's what being a good Christian is. That's what my thought was. That whatever anyone wants you to do, that you do it.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was actually healthy to set boundaries and normal, and you're allowed to do that.
Yes. Welcome back, Cody. Any audio changes? No. It said not connected to audio. Okay, hopefully you'll get connected. We'll what's this? Connecting. Let's see, did we get it? Let's see, try to unmute now. See what happens.
Okay.
Ah.
Yeah.
There we
All
go. All right. I found you guys on Google pretty much. I was looking for Christian groups on Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah, you're one of the first ones to pop up. So.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to find myself on Google, but people keep saying they find me there, so that's great. All right, well, welcome. So yeah, so people pleasing. Would you consider yourself a people pleaser?
No.
No.
Maybe I should actually become more one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I said. There's other people that have the opposite. We've talked about emotional trigger, anger. We've covered things like that usually people with the opposite problems have. But today we'll talk about people pleasing. At least you'll understand the way they think, the way people pleasers think. And so let's see. So yeah, so feel free to comment. Times. Let me see. My share button went away. Let me make this bigger. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is the outline for today. That was the introduction. Then we're going to go over defining wholeness, what the wholeness means, signs of people pleasing. We're going to see the King Saul. Look at King Saul, example of a people pleaser. We're going to look at people pleasing Jesus. What if Jesus was a people pleaser? Talk about the solution, put your identity in Christ, look at some practical steps for people pleasers. Then we're going to look at boundaries. What are boundaries? Look at the fact that Jesus had boundaries. How do you set boundaries? And then look at some examples of boundaries. So that's the outline of the lesson today. Let's see any comments, questions. Okay. So wholeness. This lesson is on seeking wholeness. This series, we've been in it for the past 4 years, called Seeking Wholeness, and we're looking at how to be mentally, emotionally, and spiritually healthy. So how to be free from oppression from the past, free from oppression from bad thinking, from strongholds, from the enemy. We're talking about we're dealing with concerns that we have, stresses everyday life, and then also how to deal with issues from the past. You know, Jesus promised us eternal life, but the Bible also promises joy, peace, patience, and self-control here on earth. And a lot of people don't actually have that. A lot of Christians don't have that. And so we're looking at, okay, well, what are some practical steps? How do we gain that? If it didn't come supernaturally when we got saved, and, you know, how can we work towards the things? And so some of the traits of wholeness, we've defined about 37 traits that we're striving for. And different lessons cover different of these traits. And so these are the things that we've defined as the traits of wholeness. These are the things we're striving for, and it may be a lifelong journey. You know, it may be a lifelong journey, so we don't need to beat ourselves up if we're still working on some of these things. But these are the traits that we're striving for and covering in the various lessons. Number 1 is authenticity, honesty, kindness. We want our behavior not be influenced by external approval or validation. We want to live by values and principles. We want to set boundaries. We want to take ownership of our responsibilities. We want to live with purpose and passion. We want to have optimism, confidence, not losing control of our emotions. We want to be free from addictions. We want to address conflict with truth and love. Be vulnerable. Not be critical or judgmental, not jealous of others. We want to forgive those who've wronged us in the past. We want to know that we're worthy of receiving love, not be afraid to fail, able to manage irrational fear, worry, and anxiety, have selfless encounters with others, not manipulate others trying to control their actions or reactions. We want to care about how others feel. We want to be patient, not give in to peer pressure or social pressure. We want to be able to communicate without antagonizing others. We want to be able to recognize, manage, and take responsibility for our own thoughts and feelings. We want to be slow to anger. We want to be able to maturely express our wants, needs, and desires. We want to be able to listen without reacting. We want to be able to function well alone or with others. We want to respect others without having to change them. We want to be able to take responsibility for our own destiny in life. We want to be able to maintain a non-anxious presence in the midst of anxiety and stress. We want to be able to ask for what we need clearly, directly, and honestly. We want to have the capacity to resolve conflict maturely. And ultimately, we want to be led by the Holy Spirit. So those are the traits that we're striving for. And so we cover various ones in various lessons. And for some of us, it may be a lifelong journey on some of these. That's what we're striving for. Let's see. Well, let's see. Where are you at, Cody? What's city? City?
Yeah, I'm from a small town in Tennessee, so probably never heard of it.
Oh,
Cookeville.
what's it called?
Cookeville. It's an hour away from Nashville.
Oh, okay, Nashville. Yeah, I was there couple years ago for the first time. Nashville. Good time.
I wouldn't recommend visiting it now. It's getting pretty rough. So.
Oh. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, sorry to hear that. All right. So let's see. So people pleasing. So what are some of the signs of people pleasing? People pleasers. So people pleasers, I'll share these as well. Make my screen bigger. They find it hard to say no to requests. People pleasers take on extra work even if they don't have time. They often overcommit to plans, responsibilities, and projects. They avoid advocating for their own needs. So they may say, that they're okay when they're not. They avoid disagreeing with people and voicing their honest opinion. They go along with things they're not happy with just to avoid creating friction. A person with these tendencies, they also may feel pressure to be friendly, nice, and cheerful at times. They may feel anxious about creating unease or standing up for themselves. They may feel stressed to do commitments they have not taken on. They may be frustrated, seem to have no time for themselves. They feel that their own wants and needs don't matter in comparison to others. And then they feel that people take advantage of them. So one of the thoughts of people pleasers is that they believe that if they're good, then they'll be loved, they'll get their needs met, and they'll have less problems in life. And so I know a lot of non-people pleasers that go, why would you think that? But so we talked about the fact that in life, as a child, we generally choose one of three paths to life. One is to choose to move towards people. That's where you say, if I'm good, if I follow the rules, then life will be easier. The second path people choose is to say, I'm going to rebel. I'm going to go against the grain. I'm going to challenge people. I'm going to confront people. So that's just moving against people. That's the second approach. And the third approach is moving away. People say, my life will be easier if I just move away, stay away from people. If I just be a recluse, if I just don't interact with anybody. So we generally choose one of those three approaches to life. And so people pleasers have chose the route of, I'm going to move towards people. I'm going to follow the rules. And my life will be easier. And so that's the people pleaser route. And so now we're going to, any comments or questions? No? Okay. All right. So now we'll look at example of King Saul, the people pleaser. let's see. Have you been Christian for a while, Cody?
Yeah, all my life. I'm getting back to it very seriously.
Okay.
Since 2024, more seriously than I've taken it, in my youth. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Absorb as much knowledge as I can, connect with as much people, not go back to what 2023 was. So.
Amen. All right. Yeah, it's always right now is always the best time. Right now is always the best. Amen. All right. Welcome, Steve. Welcome, Steve.
Wow, what did I miss?
Oh, we're talking about people pleasers today.
Oh man, I was looking at some of the stuff that you were covering in the outline. Have you got to the part where, let me see, setting boundaries?
No, boundaries is last.
Okay.
So right now we just kind of defined what a people pleaser is. Defined what people pleasing is. People pleasers, people who feel strong urge to please others, even at their own expense. They feel that their wants, needs do not matter or alter their personality around others. And how it's different than kindness, generosity, and altruism, because they're doing stuff that they don't actually want to do because out of fear of how other people feel or how other people will react.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I left you a message, by the way. I don't know if you received it over the weekend. I don't know if you get...
An email message?
Yeah, but I don't know if it was directed to your phone. I think it was to the church or the... So I don't know. I just addressed it to you and in the general mailbox or something like that.
Oh.
And you probably were out or something, but didn't have a chance to...
This
I
weekend?
didn't know how else to...
Okay.
I guess I could have emailed you. I don't know if you could receive that. Maybe I could have. I didn't want to disturb you though, so
Oh, you left...
I just wanted to...
Oh, yeah. You can email me. Oh, you left a voice message somewhere?
Yeah,
That's
from
true.
the Unchained Church, from the, actually from, I don't know, the website or something like that. I thought I did,
Oh,
but maybe not.
okay. Yeah, email
Just wanted to
would work.
reach out to you.
Okay.
I didn't know if you had an opportunity or not.
No. I've gotten emails from you in the past, but I didn't get that message.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah, okay. All right, so now we're going to look at King Saul, the people pleaser. King Saul, the people pleaser. So we're going to be reading 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses 12 to 24. So as we read this, now that we know the definition of a people pleaser, as we read the story, I want you to think of what are some traits that Saul is exhibiting, traits of a people pleaser. What are some traits of a people pleaser that Saul is exhibiting? So in the book of 1 Samuel, the Amalekites, the Israelites attacked the Amalekites, and God told them to kill them. He told them to take all of their possessions. He told them to kill all the people, to kill all the animals. That was the direction that God gave them. And so we'll pick up from there. So 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses 12 through 24. It says, Samuel got up early in the morning to meet Saul. And it was reported to Samuel, saying, Saul came to Carmel, and behold, he set up a monument for himself. Then turned and proceeded on down to Gilgal. So Samuel came to Saul, and Saul said to him, Blessed are you of the Lord. I have carried out the command of the Lord. But Samuel said, What then is the bleating of sheep in my ears, and the bellowing of oxen which I hear? Saul said, They have brought the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God. But the rest we have completely destroyed. Then Samuel said to Saul, Stop, and let me inform you of what the Lord said to me last night. And he said to him, Speak. So Samuel said, Is it not true, though you were insignificant in your own eyes, that you became the head of the tribes of Israel? For the Lord anointed you as king over Israel. And the Lord sent you on a mission and said, go and completely destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are eliminated. Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Instead, you loudly rushed upon the spoils and did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Then Saul said to Samuel, I did obey the voice of the Lord, for I went on the mission the Lord sent me, and I brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and have completely destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took some of the spoils, sheep and oxen, the choicest of things designed for destruction, and to sacrifice to the Lord for God at Gilgal. Samuel said, does the Lord have as much delight in burnt offering as sacrifice, as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than to sacrifice, and to pay attention is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as reprehensible as sin of divination, and insubordination is as reprehensible as false religion and idolatry. Since you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you from being king. Then Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned, for I have violated the command of the Lord and your words, because I feared the people and listened to their voice. All right, so Saul, he violated the word of God. So what were some people-pleasing traits that Saul exhibited? Anybody? No?
He didn't follow the directions. He didn't finish killing the animals or whoever he was supposed to kill, and gave them for this sacrifice or something, I think it was.
Yes. All right. And why did he do it? Why did he claim he did it?
Because he didn't want to upset the people?
Yeah, fear the people. Okay. All right.
Oh, yeah, but could it be that he did it because he didn't want people to follow him, or?
Well, he wanted people to follow him. Yeah, it says, he says, because I feared the people and listened to their voice. But it could have, in 24.
Okay, I got it. Okay, now.
So now let's look at some traits. So now we'll look at some traits, some of the negative traits that people pleasers have, and we'll look at example from Saul. So in verse 12, 1 Samuel 15:12, it says, he set up a monument for himself. He turned and proceeded down Gilgal. So he set up a monument for himself. So he was seeking recognition. He was seeking praise. So a lot of times people pleasers, they do things because they want validation. They want approval. They want to look good for other people. And so we all do things because we want validation. We all do things because we want to look good. We all do things, and it's not, and it's a human trait. It's not necessarily wrong, but we don't want that to guide our behavior. So some of the things that we may do in order for approval. So we do things for people's approval, for validation. So some of the things we may get approval from or get validation. We want to have our hair just right, or we want to be smart. We want people to think we're smart. We want to have a pleasant, non-threatening voice. We want to appear unselfish. We want to be different than other men or different than other women. Or we want to get validation by staying sober or staying in good shape or being a good dancer, good lover, never getting angry, making other people happy, being a good worker, having a clean car, dressing nicely, being nice, never offending anyone or appearing to be good. And so it's not necessarily wrong to do those things, but we want to just take notice of and honest to ourselves why we're doing it. If we're doing it to look good in other people's eyes, to get validation from other people, to get praise, to get compliment, to make ourselves feel better, to make ourselves feel worthy. And
you mentioned being a good worker. There's a difference between being a servant and a brown nosy.
like that.
Yeah. You just want to look good for the boss, which it's a difference. Just for the appearance. So the second thing he did was he was dishonest. In verse 15, 1 Samuel 15, he says, they have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and the oxen. So that was true, but he was involved as well. Because up in verse 9 it says Saul and the people were unwilling to destroy them. So he's saying, oh yeah, the people, they did it. So he was being so dishonest. So he's leaving out part of the truth. And so sometimes as people pleasers, we may leave out truth, or we may omit information in order to please people, in order to make ourselves look good in front of other people. I mean, obviously, this is a common human trait that not just people pleasers do. A lot of people do that. But another mistake he did was he didn't own up to his mistake. In 15:21, he says, the people did it. So he's blaming other people. He's letting other people get the blame. He doesn't admit to his own mistake. So a lot of times as people pleasers, when we do something wrong, we don't want to admit it.
Yeah.
And there's a concept called DEER, D-E-E-R. So when someone calls you out for something, you DEER, you defend, explain, excuse, or rationalize. And so it's not just people pleasers. A lot of us will do a lot of people will do that. Somebody says something, you got to defend it. You got to explain. Well, the reason it was because of that. Or you got to excuse. You got an excuse for it. Oh, there was traffic. I'm late. I was late because there was traffic. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, there was traffic, but didn't you leave your house 20 minutes later than you planned to leave?
Yeah.
Or we'll rationalize it. And then the last people-pleasing trait he had was fear of man. So he was a fear of people. So in verse 15:24 it says, then Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned, for I violated the command of the Lord and your words, because I feared the people and listened to their voice. So a lot of times people pleasers and the rest of us as well, I'm a people pleaser, but we do things out of fear. We're afraid of other people's opinion, of other people's feel. And so when we say fear, we're worried about what other people think. And so when you're worried about what other people think, one thing that can cause you to do is you agree with whoever's in front of you. When you're with this group of people, you're like, oh, Trump, I hate Trump. He's this horrible person. Then you get with this group of people, you're like, oh, yeah, that Biden, he's a horrible person. and you just agree with whoever's in front of you. You agree with whoever's in front of you because you're afraid of people. Or you're afraid to say no. People ask you to do something, and you'll agree to do it because you're afraid of what people say. And that's one of the big traits of people pleasers is they don't say no. And another thing we do when we're afraid of man is that we don't stand for anything. We don't really take a stance on anything. We just go with whatever the majority agrees on. We won't take a stance. We won't stand up for something we believe is right if other people, if it's going to cause a problem with other people. We become chameleons. It's like I change. When I'm with this group, I think this. When I'm with this group, I think that. When I'm by myself, I'm complaining about this and this. When I'm in church, I'm doing this way. When I'm at because we don't want to show our true self, or our true self is just based on how we are, based on who we're in front of. If I'm in front of these people, I'm one way. If I'm in front of these people, I'm another way. And we'll change it up based on who we're from. We're chameleons because we're afraid of people. And then the last trait is, or any thoughts? Any thoughts or comments so far?
Yeah, I'm really glad we're talking about this. This is something that me and my friends have been talking about for weeks now, about how irrational it is to be afraid of what other people think.
Mm.
And, I could rant about this for like 20 minutes. I'm just not. But, yeah, no, it's very irrational. That's why many people don't even, they don't follow their dreams. They don't even try to do what God is telling them.
Right.
And just like that passage said, disobedience is a sin, you know, and that's one of the worst things you can do is disobey God. It reminds me of the servant who got the 2 coins. And
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like when God is telling you to, here's your money, here's your gift, do something with it, and you come back empty-handed, you know? Well, I got the 2 coins. I mean, that's a sin, disobedience. So I love that we're talking about this.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. And so, so don't stand for anything. And the last thing is that people pleasers are external referencing. External referencing means, so if someone's internal referencing, that means that they determine whether they did a good job, determine what's right or wrong based on their values and their principles. External referencing means I'm going to determine whether I did a good job, whether I did right or wrong based on other people's reaction. You know, if other people thought I did good, then it was good. I'm going to base whether this post was good based on how many likes people give it. It's like, oh, I got a lot of likes on this. That must have been good. And so we're basing it on other people's reaction. We're externally referencing. You know, it's not, you know, and so that's another trait of people pleasers. When you have fear of man, your opinion is based and you just go with the wind. You flow with the wind. And so it's like when you have a test, some tests were 90% and higher was an A, 80% was a B, 70% was a C. And then there are other tests in classes where they graded on a curve. You know, I remember getting to some of those higher level engineering courses and nobody got above an 80. So an 80 was an A. So it's graded on a curve. And so we're basing our life, our values on a curve based on how everybody else thought it should be. So that's not how we should be. You know, but it's okay to reference, you know, the Bible, reference, you know, experts and mentors, you know, iron sharpens iron. But if in general you're just referencing the crowd, then that's not a good thing. Any thoughts?
No, based on a curve. I know that's not. I know that you're not talking about salvation.
No, salvation is it's based on it's based on Jesus' works. Jesus' works alone.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, I may have to cut out here earlier, y'all. I have another appointment, so I'll have to catch up with y'all later. God bless y'all.
Okay. God bless you.
I wish I could have had more time with y'all, but I just came in really quick and say hello, and then hope y'all have a good evening.
Okay. Yeah, you can watch the video later if you want to see. All right.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Catch up with you later, Michael.
Okay. All right.
Right.
Okay. And as Cody mentioned, so people pleasing can actually hurt your relationship with God. So what are some ways that people pleasing can hurt your relationship with God? Any thoughts on that? You gave one, Cody.
Well, I guess I'll just add something. Sound like a broken record here, but, you know, pretty much you're spitting in the face of God the moment you put someone else's opinion above his. You know? And very simple. All you gotta, you know, God compares the church as his bride, and he constantly refers to Israel as a whore. And it's the same thing. You don't listen to your husband, you don't listen to your parents, and you care what other people think, and you judge you do in your actions, disobey them, then obviously that's going to ruin the relationship, and that can also hold back the gifts that your partner or your father has for you. You know, how can you inherit anything of value when you can't even follow his own words?
Amen. Yeah. Yeah. So it can prevent you from, you can choose to please people instead of God. It can prevent you from evangelizing. You're afraid of the people's reaction. So to prevent you from evangelizing, it can cause you to be politically correct and just stand for what's politically correct instead of what's standing for God. It can cause you to not follow your purpose. See, Cody actually mentioned that. You know, you may have things in life that God has told you to pursue, but you're worried about what people think you're worried about, or even worried about failure maybe, can prevent you from doing that. And then it makes you not authentic. So you're not being your true self. You're being the self that you think people want to see. Yeah. All right. So now we'll look at an example of what would it look like if Jesus was do you think Jesus was a people pleaser? Do you think Jesus was a people pleaser?
I say yes and no.
Yes and no?
Yeah.
Okay. So
When he made a lot of people very mad.
you said, say that again?
I said he pleased a lot of people and he made a lot of people very mad.
Yeah, he pleased a lot of people and he made a lot of people mad.
Yes and no come in, yeah.
And but at the end of the day, he pleased a lot of people. He was kind, he was loving, but he didn't do it out of fear of what they would think of him. Mm-hmm. You know, he didn't act on him. So if Jesus was a people pleaser, what would it have looked like? If Jesus was a people pleaser, he would have worried about the Pharisees not liking him. Because as people pleasers, we definitely worry about how the church leadership looks at us. You know, if we're worried about how the other Christians look at us, we're definitely worried about how the church leadership. Jesus would have worried about the Pharisees not liking him. And that was clear. He clearly wasn't worried about how the Pharisees felt about him. He wasn't trying to win over the Pharisees. If Jesus was a people pleaser, he would have stood there and watched them stone the adulterous woman. Mm-hmm. He would have said, okay, well, everyone else is going along with it. He's like, wait, okay, maybe I don't want to rock the boat. Let me just be quiet. And he would have stood by as they stoned her. If Jesus was a people pleaser, he would have stopped saying he was the Messiah, because a lot of people were getting mad when he said it. Yeah. He would just, let me just stop bringing that up. A lot of people don't seem to like that. If Jesus was a people pleaser, when Mary and Martha said, hey, Lazarus is sick, he would have went wide away and healed him. Lazarus would never have died. There would be no miracle of raising Lazarus from the grave if Jesus was a people pleaser, because he would have went right away when they asked him. He definitely wouldn't have ever said, eat my flesh and drink my blood, because when he said that after feeding the 5,000, he lost thousands of the crowd because he didn't explain it. You know, he would say stuff and wouldn't bother to explain it. He would lose followers, and he didn't bother to explain it. And he wouldn't have turned over the tables at the temple. That's not people-pleasing behavior. He wouldn't have went to the church and started disrupting things if he was a people-pleaser. So that's people-pleasing Jesus. All right, so now we're going to look at any thoughts on people-pleasers? We're going to look at some solutions to being a people pleaser. Any final thoughts on not final, but any other thoughts on what's been said so far? Oh, well, that's right. We got so we take a break at the half point. Okay, welcome back. We're going to continue on our lesson on people pleasing and setting boundaries. So now we're going to look at one of the solutions to people pleasing. The first solution is to put your identity in Christ. Put your identity in Christ. Who has Colossians 3? Eric, you have Colossians 3, 1-3?
Yes, I do.
Colossians chapter 3, verses 1-3.
Got it. Since then, you have been raised with Christ. Set your heart on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things, for you died and your life is now hidden with Christ in God.
All right, so you died and your life is hidden with Christ in God. So part of people pleasing is that you're worried about what other people think. So your self-worth is tied to the opinions of other people, how other people react, how other people feel. And so your self-esteem should be more tied with your relationship with God. You know, when we talk about fear God, you know, we're not talking about be afraid of him, he may hurt me. You know, it's the same as when we talk about fear man. Fear of man is not you're afraid that someone's going to hurt you. It's just you're worried about their opinion of you. And so you should be more concerned with Jesus's opinion of you, God's opinion on you, than you are with your job, than your kids' school, than your accomplishments. And I've used the analogy before of an Olympic athlete. So we have Olympic athletes, and we we look up to a lot of the Olympic athletes. And if someone tells you they're an Olympic athlete, then that tells you a lot about them. That tells you that what school they go to is going to be dictated by the fact that they're an Olympic athlete. What they can eat and drink is dictated by the fact that they're an Olympic athlete. Whether they can take a job or what type of job they can take is dictated by the fact that they're an Olympic athlete. If they're an Olympic athlete, they're going to miss out on some parties because they're an Olympic athlete. They're going to stay up earlier. They're going to work later because they're an Olympic athlete. And so their life is centered around the fact, where they live, where they choose to live is based on the fact that they're an Olympic athlete. So we should be the same as Christians. If your identity is based in Jesus, then your life is focused around Jesus. You're worried about Jesus's opinion more than others, and your life is centered around Jesus. So that's what it means to have your identity in Christ. It's like my identity isn't in what other people say, but my job title is not in this. It's not in my gender. It's not in this. It's not in my race. It's in the fact that I'm a Christian. That's my major identity, and that's what I relate more to the fact that I'm a Christian than anything else. And so that is one of the cures to people pleasing. If you're more worried about what God thinks about you than what people think about you, that's the first cure to people pleasing. Any thoughts? No? Okay. So now some practical steps you can do if you're a people pleaser. Number one is to identify, or even if you're not a people pleaser, a lot of these will be helpful. Number one is to identify what are the things you do to seek approval. What are things you do to feel validated by other people? Are you washing your car for validation from other people? Are you cleaning your kitchen? Are you holding the door open for people to feel validated for them? Are you spending extra time on your hair? Are you're walking with your child or your dog in the park because you like the compliments and the praises that people give you? And so it's not necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, taking care of yourself is a good thing. Watching what you eat, it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, but just take note of that you're doing it for validation. And if you think that maybe you're too focused on other people's opinion, you can try for a month or two to not do one of those things. Choose one of those things you do for validation and not do it for a couple of months. Yeah, that's an exercise you can do. I mean, when I first went through this Boundaries book was during the pandemic, and my hair was looking like Cody. I let my afro grow out during the pandemic just because I realized I was, right now I cut my hair every week, and I was like, oh, I'm doing that for validation. Let me just stop. And I had an afro during the pandemic for a year.
It was a baby one.
a baby one, yeah. It wasn't as big as Cody's.
I'm cutting my hair now just for validation.
No.
Don't do that.
No, actually, so mine was the opposite. I let it grow. So maybe you're not cutting it because you're not worried about what other people think. So
right.
So you've solved that problem, but find an area where you are doing it because of what people think. No, your hair's fine. It just happened to be. I kept reading it an example. I'm like, man, he's gonna think I'm talking. But the second step is to reveal yourself to safe people. So a lot of times as people pleasers, we don't want to let people see the real us. We want to just show the good side. We want to just show people, and that's one of the problems with people pleasers is that you don't really have authentic relationships because people don't know how you really feel. People, you don't tell people what made you mad. You don't tell people, so people don't know how to navigate through navigate with you because you haven't really let them see the real you. And so they can't, so they don't know the real you. And so as a people pleaser, you don't really feel connection because you aren't showing people the real you. You know, so find somebody, you know, I'm saying not go out to just a random person, to find somebody who's safe that you can be vulnerable about something with. So that would be another step. You know, obviously, you know, don't just go to anybody and blab you know, your deepest, darkest secret, but find somebody who's safe and be vulnerable about something. That's another step you can take as a people pleaser. Another step you can take is don't make offers that you hope will be declined. Angel, you have 2 Corinthians 9:7.
Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver.
So that verse is talking about tithing, but that verse is saying, he's saying, you don't even give me your offering if you're reluctant to give it. So how much more do you think, you know, so do you think he's requiring us to do whatever people want, you know, even though we're reluctant to do it? So don't give reluctantly. Don't do it reluctantly or out of compulsion. Do it cheerfully. So don't make offers that you hope will be declined. So I know a lot of times people will offer up to do something and then they're mad. They're mad when they actually have to deliver on it. It's like, okay, as a people pleaser, stop offering to do things. If you don't want to do it, don't offer. You know, so you know, the ultimate step is to say no to when people ask you to do things. But the first step is don't offer. So it's like, okay, you get to the point where you're not saying yes when people ask you, but it's like the first step is there's some things that you're offering to do. Nobody even asked you. You're just offering to do it because you think it's the good thing to do, but you don't really want to do it. So don't offer if you don't want to do it. If you don't want to do it, don't offer if you're hoping that the person's going to say, no, that's okay. You know, a lot of times people will, you know, if you're a people pleaser, people will try to take advantage of that. They'll try to manipulate you. And so somebody may say something like, well, I guess I have to wash my car myself this weekend. You know, even though you're really good at washing cars, I guess I'll wash it myself. And then as a people pleaser, we usually go, oh, well, you want me to wash it? I'll wash it. It's like, if you don't want to do it, don't offer. Don't offer to do it if you don't want to do it. You know, so just, I guess I have to wash the car myself this weekend. Yeah, it'll be really clean after that. Just get the habit of not offering if especially if nobody asks. Welcome, David. Welcome, David. We're talking about people pleasers. I saw you logged on. Oh no, that was Monday. Yeah, people pleasers. And now we're looking at some solutions to people pleasers. Welcome, from Trinidad. That's right. Welcome, David from Trinidad. Good to see you. At the end you can tell. I know we were praying for somebody last time. You can tell us how that went. But right now we're talking about people pleasers and how to get over people pleasers. So try to get comfortable not offering. I mean, obviously, so we're saying it's people pleasing not just because you're doing something for somebody, but it's you're doing something you don't want to do. So if it's something you want to do and you're comfortable doing, then go ahead and offer. Do as many things as you want. If there are things you want to do, if you want to wash the cars and clean the shoes and you then do it. But don't, you know, if it's this stuff, if you don't want to do it, don't offer. Let's see. Any thoughts, comments so far? Any thoughts or comments? No. Okay. I got a few more. So the other is don't answer immediately. So if someone asks you to do something, take a minute to think about it. You know, think about it. Your schedule. Is it something take a minute to think about it. Don't answer immediately. The next thing is set limits. So instead of just saying, yes, I can babysit, you could say I can babysit between 7 and 9, or I can babysit on every other Saturday when I'm not doing this. So set specific times, specific hours that you're offering up the help. And then in addition to that, something you could do is block your calendar. Block your calendar for time to refresh or block your calendar for things that you need to have done. And so, you're busy at those times. And then lastly is to rehearse saying no. So practice saying no. Practice what is a polite way or a way to say no that you're comfortable saying no. So to practice it. And so those are some practical tips to overcoming people pleasing. Any thoughts? Any other tips? Or any thoughts? Anybody else have any other ways they say no to things they don't want to do?
This is probably not even like on topic, but I mean, I think one of the best ways to cure being a people pleaser is just go down in the dumps. You know that like famous saying of when you're at the bottom, then that's when you get to know your real friends.
Yeah.
A lot of people will just take advantage of the resources you have, right? And so, pretty much, this might seem a little like dramatic, but if you were homeless, right, you were living underneath a bridge, people wouldn't even look at you. You know what I mean? You would be dying of hypothermia. They wouldn't even give you a blanket. So I don't see the point of caring about what those people think, especially when you feel God is calling you to do something else. So I don't know if that seems a little like dramatic or anything like that, but I mean that's a real possibility. You can go down in the dumps, and the same people that will, like the other guy said, brown nose you, will just let you die, literally. So
Yeah, well, it's a little dramatic, but it's truth. It's truth to it in the fact that when you find out, they say you find out your true friends when you need them. When you need the people that you're there for all the time. And as people pleasers, you never ask for help. So then when you do need help, that's when you find out. And that's sort of why you want to express the things you don't want. Express what you don't like. I don't like this. So a lot of times you won't express it because you're afraid, well, if then they may not like me if I say I don't want to do this or I don't want that. But that's what you really want is you don't want you don't want someone who likes you just because you're doing everything they want. That's not a real friend. You want someone who's going to be there when there's conflict, be there when you're down. You're not gonna have real friends unless you let the real you show. They have to see the good, bad, and the ugly. And when
people do the same thing during relationships, like they'll say whatever, just keep that relationship going, and it turns out the moment you get into one argument, you never talk to each other ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's so you want to bring it up. Yeah. Test it. All right. So now we'll get into boundaries. So what are boundaries? A boundary is a guideline, it's a rule, it's a limit. It states this is what I'm okay with and this is what I'm not okay with. So a boundary is about, one thing is about is ownership. So taking ownership of your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own body, your own decision, and your own behavior. And then it's also about not trying to take ownership of somebody else's thoughts, feelings, body, behavior, or decisions. Boundaries is about responsibility. What am I responsible for in this relationship, and what is someone else responsible for? So the boundary is saying whoever's responsible for it, they're going to get the consequences of it. So whoever's responsibility it is, I'm not going to take on the responsibility of the other person as their the consequences for someone else's responsibility. So you're not responsible for what someone else wants, and you're not responsible for their limits. You're responsible for your own limits. So you set your own limits, what you're willing to do. Boundaries about being able to say no. Allows you to say no and not doing things that you don't want to do. But you do need to do things that are your responsibility to do. So boundary isn't saying, you get to shirk your responsibilities. So boundary isn't saying, I'm not going to show up to work because I'm going to set a boundary. It's like, no, so these are things boundary is setting a boundary, things that aren't your responsibility. So things that aren't your responsibility, where you want to draw the line. It's about looking at what do you have authority, a boundary. So a boundary is a dividing line. So you're dividing what's your responsibility, what's not. What do you own and what don't you own? What do you have authority over? So the boundary defines, okay, what do I have authority over and what does someone else have authority over? So for example, your parents don't get to dictate how your kids are raised. You have authority over your kids, not your parents. So the boundary is a set over authority. And it's also over access. Who has access to your life? So it's about responsibility, it's about ownership, it's about access, and it's about authority. It's defining what is the boundary, where does the separation between when my ownership and my access is. And it's okay if your boundaries are unique. So you don't have to just set the same boundaries everyone else has. You have unique needs that can be. So the goal of boundaries is that the boundary states that these things will no longer work for me. So when you set a boundary and you want to decrease negative things in the relationship. So it's not about trying to change the other person. It's not manipulation. A lot of times people will talk about boundaries and they try to do things to manipulate the other person to do what they want. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about changing things so you're not doing things that aren't your responsibility. It's not getting the other person to do what you want, trying to change their behavior. So it's not saying I'm going to set a boundary that you need to come wash my car every week. Mm-hmm. That's not a boundary. That's not a boundary. A boundary is you're setting responsibility of what you will do, what's not your responsibility. And a boundary is also not an agreement. The other person doesn't necessarily have to agree to it. You get to decide your boundary. Any thoughts or comments so far on boundary? Yeah, and the ultimate goal of the boundary is that so that you can be vulnerable. So now that you have a safe place, you aren't being misused, you aren't being manipulated, now I can open up. Now I can be myself. Now I can feel safe. Whereas you don't feel like you're being taken advantage of. You don't feel like I can't trust this person. So now that the boundaries are in place, now you can feel safe to open up. And now the relationship can be closer, can be more intimate because you have these boundaries. Now that these things have been put out into the open, you're not just mad saying, oh, they never do this, they never do that. Now it's out in the open and you've talked about it and there's a boundary set up. And so now you can just go on and be vulnerable. And so people pleasers, they have a problem being authentic and setting boundaries. And the boundary also needs to have a consequence. So it has to have a consequence or else it's just a threat. And so ultimately, a boundary means that the consequences fall upon the person whose responsibility it is. So, for instance, if you have someone that you let move in and because they're not working, the responsibility and now you don't, all your money is going so they can eat dinner and you don't get to eat any food. So boundary is meaning that the consequences fall on the person whose responsibility it is. It's like, okay, now, so changing the boundary would say, okay, now it's this person's responsibility, so this person is going to suffer the consequences, not me. So that's what boundaries is about. People pleasers generally have a problem with setting boundaries. They rather usually backpedal and just give in to keep the peace. Let's see. Anybody have any example of a boundary that they've set?
I mean, I don't know if it's a boundary, but sort of to go on your point, I do value transparency from the beginning. You know what I mean? That seems to be the problem, especially when it comes to things like relationships or friends you've had for a very long time. I think everyone, at least once in their life, they've always heard, "Oh, you changed," or "You're not the person that I used to know." Well, the reason stuff like that gets said is because you put on a front, you put on a facade for the other person, and to be more liked. And the moment you start getting comfortable with them, you start showing them your real self, but they didn't fall in love with your real self. They don't like your real self. They fall in love with the facade.
Right.
So yeah, the boundary is like, I mean, this eliminates like 98% of friendships and relationships I get into, but like right from the beginning, I have these morals and I have these expectations of my friends and of the relationship I'm going to get into, and I would just prefer things to be right there on the table from the very beginning than kind of play this little back and forth game of like hinting at what I mean. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. So that's example of boundaries. So telling people up front what you will tolerate, what you won't tolerate. So an example would be, hey, I'd prefer, if you not respond to texts the whole time we're at dinner. Versus, if you don't if you're letting that happen for the first 6 months you're together, and then 6 months in, now you start complaining about it. Once you get comfortable, it's like, well, hey, you didn't complain about it this whole time. So setting a boundary at the beginning is good. So setting a boundary, so basically voicing your wants, needs, and desires, but the boundary is saying, this is the specific line. And if you don't have boundaries, so some of the impact of not having boundaries are, you don't feel safe, you feel disempowered, you're anxious, you can feel like you're walking on eggshells, especially a people pleaser because you're worried about them blowing up. You have a hard time identifying what you really feel. You stop thinking for yourself. You can feel hopeless and depression. And the other person is all in your business or in your physical possessions because you never set a boundary. So that's the impact of not setting boundaries if you haven't communicated them. But then on the other hand, you could have over-aggressive boundaries. There's some people that, I don't do dishes. I don't open, I don't tie my own shoes. I don't, you could have over-aggressive boundaries, and then that makes, it's like you're bullying the other person because you said, these are my boundaries, so that's not what we want to do either. We don't want to do either. So the boundaries are around your responsibility. So the boundary is basically saying things that are the other person's responsibility, I'm not going to do them, or things, but it's also, communicating what's tolerable and what's not tolerable. And so you're going to have different boundaries for different relationships. So now let's look at some examples of boundaries that Jesus set. So Jesus set some boundaries. Let's see. I think Eric stepped away. Eric had Luke. Was that Luke 5? Was that you or Eric, Angel?
That's it.
Okay. So I'll read Luke chapter 5, verses 15 to 16. It talks about Jesus. It said, "But the news about him was spreading even farther, and large crowds were gathering to hear him, and he healed of their sickness. But Jesus would often slip away into the wilderness and pray." So there were people that wanted to be healed. Big crowds were waiting for him, but he would still slip away and pray. So he set a boundary. His boundary was, I'm going to go and spend time with God. That's my boundary. That, I'm not negotiating hey, you guys, it's like I'm gonna slip away and spend time with God. So it's like even so we can do that. Hey, if I've got somebody staying for the weekend, and it's like on Sunday morning I'm going to church. That's my boundary. So I can't show you around. I can't do. It's like you don't necessarily have to go. I'm not so. So it's not manipulation, but the boundary is I'm not going to be. I'm going to be at church on Sunday is the boundary. So the boundary is you're setting limits on your responsibility. I can't do this for you on Sunday because I'm going to be at church. That's my boundary. And then we also have Matthew 12:46-50. You have that, Angel?
Yeah. While Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brother stood outside wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, "Your mother and brothers are standing outside waiting to speak to you." He replied to him, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" Pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother."
So Jesus set a boundary in his later years that whoever's following me on my path is who's going to get my time. Whoever's following me on my path is, not even my family. Not even my family. And then finally we have Matthew. Eric, you have Matthew 13, verses 10-11.
Yes. Oh, yes, I do. Okay. The disciples came to him and asked, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" He replied, "Because not the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven have been given to you, but not to them."
All right. So a lot of times we say, Jesus spoke in parables, he spoke in stories, to give a better explanation. But Jesus, when they asked him, Jesus said, "Oh, I spoke in these parables so they couldn't understand."
Right.
I wasn't talking to them. They were here. They were right here, but I wasn't talking. So he wasn't talking to everybody.
Yeah.
Jesus was clear that I'm here for the sheep. I'm here for my sheep. And so Jesus set boundaries. Jesus set boundaries. All right. So now we'll talk about how to set boundaries. How do you set a boundary? How do you set a boundary? So you set a boundary. Number one, you want to pray on it. Pray on it. Pray on the boundary. Ask yourself, make sure you're not being selfish. Make sure you're not trying to manipulate the person. Make sure you're not being unloving. Second, define the boundary and the consequence. If the consequence if it's not followed. Then thirdly, you want to directly communicate the boundary. So directly tell the person what the boundary is and then follow through with the consequences if it's broken. And then you can periodically, number 5, reassess the boundary. So sometimes boundaries, you may not need the boundary anymore. All right, so now let's look at some examples of boundaries. So the first example is a physical boundary. You can set a physical boundary. And so a way to communicate a physical boundary would say, "Hey, I really enjoy catching up with you. I noticed that you really hug tightly when we greet each other. I really appreciate your affection. A lighter hug or a handshake would feel more comfortable for me, though." So that's a way to express a physical boundary. So you're telling the person, you're telling them kindly, respectfully, I appreciate what you're doing, but this is where my line is. So that's a physical boundary. An emotional boundary example. I care about you and want to be supportive, but listening to negativity constantly can be emotionally difficult for me. When you need to vent, maybe we could set a time limit, or I could suggest some resources that might help you feel better. So that's a boundary if someone is just always negative, always complaining every time you get together. And you don't want to hear so it's dependent on your level of relationship with the person. Obviously, if you're a friend of someone, a real friend, you're going to talk about negative things. But you have some people that all they talk about is negative, and all you do is listen. It's always them talking and you listening, and it's always negative. So you may want to set a boundary for that. Another boundary would be a time boundary. A time boundary. You may say, I appreciate your dedication. So this may be a work. Time boundary with work. So you say, I appreciate your dedication, but I try to keep work and my personal life separate. Unless it's an emergency, could we aim to handle work matters during office hours? I'm happy to help with this first thing tomorrow morning. So that's a way to set a boundary with work. Obviously, we said it's a matter of your responsibility. So if your job requires you to be on call or requires you, then, that's a separate story. If something is your responsibility, then you can't set a boundary around it. You can't set a boundary around, you're like, hey, it's this guy, he's at my house, he doesn't want to work, he's eating my food, he wants me to pay all the bills. It's like, yeah, but that's your 4-year-old son. That's your you can't set a boundary. That's your responsibility. So if it's something that's outside of your responsibility, outside of what the expectation is, or there may be a communication boundary. You may say, I know we're both excited to share some thoughts, but sometimes I feel like you interrupt me before I can finish speaking. Could we try letting each other finish our points before responding? So that's a boundary you can set to someone who keeps cutting you off during the conversation. They won't let you finish, get a word in edgewise. You can say, can we try to let each other finish each other's points before responding? So that's a way to express that a communication boundary. And then a privacy boundary could be something like, I'm happy to lend you things sometimes, but I'd appreciate if you could ask me first. It helps me keep track of my belongings. So that's a boundary you can set if someone is borrowing your things without asking. That's a way to express it. Any thoughts or comments? Have anybody had those examples where they needed to set those boundaries? Any of those examples?
Sometimes, like you said about the negativity thing, it just seems like a non-stop yap about something, right? If it's something really important, it's like, hey, let's put a thumbtack in it. Come back in an hour. I want you to pray about this. And, if your prayer hasn't been answered or you can't get like a clear explanation on what's going on, then come back to me in an hour and we can discuss it. But I want you to use this hour to just pray about it and ask God first before any other outside opinion.
Yeah, that's a boundary that can be set. Pray about it. So that's a boundary of prayer, and it's we're going to stop the conversation about this right now. So that's another way to do it. All right, couple more areas. One is inappropriate conversation. So who has Ephesians 4:29?
Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen.
All right, so inappropriate. So if someone is saying things that you feel are inappropriate, or maybe they're asking you questions that either are inappropriate questions or they're just not appropriate for that point in the relationship. Maybe you're on the first date and they're asking you questions, or you just met the person and they're asking you, how much do you make? Like, whoa, wait a minute. It's like, I just met you. or something.
That's right, yeah.
And so they're asking you something that's not appropriate for that point in the relationship, or just not appropriate at all. So here's an example, a video example of what you can do if that happens. It's called hook, line, and sinker. Oh, got big.
Today, I'm looking for something to say when people ask me a question I'm not comfortable answering. That's the hook, line, and sinker. Give it to me. The hook, look them straight in the eye and say, I appreciate your interest. Draw a line in the sand and say, I don't feel sharing that information is appropriate right now. Then you sink that sucker by turning around and asking them a question. Welcome to People Pleasers Express. How can I...
All right. So hook, line, and sinker. So the hook was, I appreciate the question. So you're saying something positive. I appreciate the question. But then you draw the line. It's like, I don't feel it's appropriate to answer the question. So you're drawing a line. I'm not going to answer it. But then the sinker is, then you ask them a question. So you're basically changing the conversation. So it gets you out of answering that question. So you set the boundary and you moved on. So then you've also got rid of the chance of an uncomfortable silence. So you verbalize your boundary, and then you sunk it with moving with another question. Let's see. Any thoughts so far? Okay.
I just asked if they're a cop. Every time they ask me a personal question, I'm like, are you a cop or something?
Are you a cop?
That usually doesn't work.
Yeah.
Now, the person that asked the question actually controls the conversation. As a salesperson, that's how we're trained. When you're asking the questions, the conversation is 100% in your hands. And but when the person starts asking questions back, then they're in control until you take it back. But it's always the person who asks the question. They could be pleasant questions, but it still keeps you in the driver's seat.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, so the sinker puts you back in the driver's seat now. So it's like, yeah, I appreciate you asking how much I weigh, but I don't feel comfortable answering that right now. Who are you going for in the NBA finals? So now so it puts you in control of the situation. All right. So another boundary area, two more, is boundary around your thoughts. So you control your own thoughts, but you don't control the other person's thoughts. So one area one boundary conflict that we often have, or boundary violation, is it's called mind reading. Mind reading in a relationship, and I have a video that I did about that.
Hello, I'm currently doing a Bible study on boundaries. The concept of boundaries is communicating what's okay and what's not okay with you in a relationship. You are not responsible for the other person's wants, needs, and desires. They are. But on the same token, you're not responsible for the other person's limits that they set. They are. One area we see this in is mind reading. So mind reading, one person may think, oh, I know how men think, I know how women think, and think that they know the other person's thoughts. But your thoughts are separate than the other person's thoughts. So it's a boundary violation to assume you know the other person's thoughts, especially if you don't know them well, because you're bringing in experiences from past, from other people, and assuming that you know this person's thoughts. So it's a boundary violation to mind read and assuming you know the other's thoughts. But on the same token, it's also a boundary violation to expect the other person to read your mind. Expect the other person to know where you want to eat, to know where you want to go on vacation. Expect the other person to know what pleasures you, or to know why you're upset, or to know why you're feeling a certain emotion. You should communicate that to the other person and not expect the person to read your mind. These are boundary violations, mind reading.
All right. Mind reading. So you don't assume you know what the other person is thinking, and don't expect that the other person can read your mind. Does anybody run into this? Yeah.
Ever had a girlfriend?
Yeah. So that's a boundary violation.
Yeah, it is. Time's over.
You have to communicate. Don't
Yeah.
expect the other person to know. All right. And finally, another thought violation is just the not assuming that the other person should never disagree with you. That they always have to agree with you on everything you say. That's a boundary violation. So don't. Okay. All right, David. Good to have you on, Trinidad. So that's the last boundary violation. So any thoughts on the topic? So boundaries. So that's boundaries for today. So let's walk in the way. Let's seek the truth and live the life.
This practice.
Practice, yeah, you got to practice, and practice. I guess it's they say when people pleasers start setting boundaries, it's common that they may go overboard. You just try to like set a bunch of boundaries all at once, and it's going to be tough setting boundaries of people that you've been in a relationship with for a while. Yeah. To just all of a sudden start saying, "Hey, I don't do this," and it's like I've known you all this time, you never had an issue with it, so it's going to be, it's not no. Don't expect that you're going to say, hey, this is my boundary, and the other person's going to be like, oh, yeah, that really makes a lot of sense. I'm going to follow that. I'm going to go ahead and follow that boundary. That's probably not how the conversation is going to go. That's probably not how the conversation is going to go. So don't start with everything. Just start, with one boundary at a time. And make sure, though, that it's you're limiting something that you're not responsible for. You're setting a boundary around what the other person is responsible for, or access or ownership of.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
I was just gonna say, don't always feel the need to explain yourself.
Yeah.
Why you do these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't deserve an explanation, especially for something that should be common sense.
Yeah. Or even, it doesn't even need to be common sense. It's, a lot of times, that was part of the thing I had in there. But a lot of times, people pleasers, we over explain. And so we're going, oh, well, the reason, but if it is something, if you said you were going to do something and now you're canceling or something, then you do owe an explanation. Or if it's something that is your responsibility, you can't just say, hey, I'm not going to be able to make it to the event tomorrow. It's like, well, hey, we've been planning this wedding for 10 years. All of our family is here. Mm-hmm. You do owe an explanation. But if it's something that, someone asks you to do something and you can't do it, you don't have to go on explaining for an hour. Someone asking you to do something, there's no responsibility for you to do it. It would be out of the kindness of your heart that did it. There shouldn't be any expectation of you doing it. You don't need to go on for an hour about why you can't do it. Oh, that day I'm really busy and normally I would, but you don't owe them a big explanations like, oh no, I can't make it that day. Oh, why can't you make it? It's just not a good day for me. You don't know a lot of explanation for it. And then also the level of relation, if it's like the level of relationship will also dictate how much of an explanation is appropriate